Hi, Christopher Kelsall here with AthleticsIllustrated.com. I'm here talking to Vitaly Stepanov, Russian whistleblower, who, along with German and British journalist Hajo Seppelt and David Walsh, had a major hand in exposing systematic doping in Russia, which ultimately led to the Russian Athletics Federation being suspended back in 2015. And that suspension continues today. The premise of this conversation is about the book The Russian Affair by award-winning aforementioned David Walsh. I've wanted to speak to Vitaly since 2015. He is currently with his wife, Yulia Stepanova, former 800-meter runner, and their son, Robert, living in a sort of exile away from Russia. The book release is timed interestingly near the release of the book The Rodchenkov Affair, which tells the story of Russian doping from Dr. Grigory Rodchenkov's perspective. Rodchenkov is the former head of Russia's anti-doping center. He too is living away from Russia in exile. Anyway, Vitaly, your life is a fascinating story about international corruption and almost espionage type drama. But anyway, Vitaly, how much involvement did you have in Walsh's book, The Russian Affair?
He did the interviews with both of us actually a few times. So I read many drafts. I looked at it, but obviously the final word was always, it was his decision, and it was based on his experiences. He was deciding which parts he feels are more interesting, more appropriate for the books, and which parts may not attract any reader at all.
Saying that, I guess it's written in his perspective of your story. Then, would you say that?
Yes, he was the first journalist who approached us after Hajo Seppelt's documentary in December of 2014. So he showed interest right away, and I felt that we connected really well on a personal level, that he understood us really well from the beginning. The first article that he wrote for the Sunday Times in London was, pretty direct, and, he spoke to me, he did the interview, and then he wrote what I said. So I liked that. So there wasn't, good. I'd say it was good journalism.
Yeah, sometimes there are some good journalists out there, despite what some people think. Well, you couldn't have got a better one. I mean, he did the story of Lance Armstrong, and he's won a lot of awards for journalism. So he may have been the first to reach out, but might have been just his ability to recognize an opportunity to tell a story, and you got lucky because. He's a great writer. Your wife came to you, so on your first date, she tells you that she's doping, and she knows she's talking to you, a doping control officer. Is that how it went? The first date, she had said, "Hey, I'm doping."
Yes, that was part of their conversation on the first date. Yes.
And now you're married with a child. That's crazy. So here you are. You have these great intentions to work for the Russian Anti-Doping Authority, and you want to help end doping. And here on your very first date, the lady you end up marrying and having a son, Robert, with, tells you this. So take us back to that moment when she said that to you. Like, what was the effect of that conversation?
Well, that was right after I gave my speech, how I work as a doping control officer, but I also work in the education department, and we do this educational program called Outreach. We tell people, athletes, coaches, managers, about the bad health consequences of doping, other reasons why athletes should not dope. So I told her how great the organization is doing and how good I'm doing my part, and and she kind of just smiled, and she said, you are an idiot, and you work for for the organization that helps Russian athletes to dope, and that doesn't really fight doping. And the main goal of the organization is to help Russian athletes to win international competitions.
So when she said all that, it must have been some level of shock or a surprise on your part.
Yes, correct. That was a year and a half since I started working at the Russian anti-doping agency. And before that, I saw problems. In fact, I saw many problems, but I was naive enough to think that I'm part of the team that's there to fix things, and it just takes time to make it better. It's on the bigger picture, it's the organization exists to help athletes cheat.
Which is amazing. So it's not like athletics or any sports are a real revenue generating thing as an export. Like you're not selling a product or a service. The money has to be public money to do fight doping, but as well as to have the Russian Athletic Federation as well. It's all public money. So this must come from the very top. There's been innuendo that Vladimir Putin is aware or privy to this information. So is that the way it is? It's top-down corruption in Russia?
Well, I and Yulia, you can say that we saw things from a lower level. So I personally don't have any evidence to say how high up it went, but I know for a fact when I worked at the Russian anti-doping agency, the money was coming, most of it was coming from the Russian Ministry of Sports. And I also know that if the head of Rosada, Mr. Sinyov at the time, he didn't follow orders from the Ministry of Sports properly, then the financing could stop at any point, because the organization was invoicing the Russian Ministry of Sports every 2 weeks. And obviously there are salaries to pay and there are things that have to be managed within the organization. So the boss of Rosada knew all the time, if you do something that the ministry doesn't like, the money would stop coming, and then you would have problem paying salaries. You would have problem, just keeping the organization going.
So that just talks about ego. It's just all ego and pride, because all you're doing is facilitating winning medals at international meets. There is no greater good to it other than a self-serving thing of pride, and it's all publicly funded. It sounds so perverse.
Yeah, it is. It is about pretending to follow international sports rules. Yes.
Pretending, yeah. Well, that's the thing, is I did read a little bit online from David Welch's book, The Russian Affair, and in it you ran up against, Mr. Porsche, the man who was waving $50 bills around. I guess you don't want to identify him, Sinev, and a couple other people along the way, and they're telling you this isn't the way it works, and you're butting heads here. Did your alarm bells start going off? Like, did you have fear for your career and your life at some point before you decided to blow the whistle?
Well, there is only so much that you can do. Well, at least that was the case for me within the Russian anti-doping agency. So, and I had a complicated personal life as well, where my wife was part of the system as well, and she was using prohibited substances. And even she, in the beginning, when we had the conversation, she didn't know how deep the cover-ups go. It was a little year after that when she learned that that really the chosen ones, they are doped by Mr. Portugalov, and then at national competitions, they just they provide doping samples after their competition, and they text the email, they text the sample number to Mr. Portugalov. Then Mr. Portugalov sends it to Mr. Rodchenkov, and the sample is never reported as positive, even though everybody knows that that the athlete is preparing for international competition, and the athlete is dirty. And at the same time, World Anti-Doping Agency keeps on saying that it is our main concern to start doing proper target testing out of competition testing, because you really would have to be stupid to dope during national competitions.
Yeah, right.
And yet Russian authorities, Russian Ministry of Sports, Russian Athletics Federation felt, okay, that's how WADA feels, that you really have to be stupid, and they don't even, really take that part seriously, that the whole national federation may be doping its athletes at the national championships. Well, that's what we're going to do. Our top 5 athletes in at least in females running events, and I never really, I believe it wasn't just Russian running events. It was most of the events within track and field. Those chosen ones were doped during competitions. And I'm sorry, I kind of went off track on the previous question. So at one point I got fired. so it was, people felt within the Russian Anti-Doping Agency, and that I wasn't good enough to fight doping the proper Russian way, so I was fired. And how to become a chosen one? You compete at lower level competitions, and you have to keep improving. You have to be at certain age where the top officials would feel that you would continue improving, and you would have to show almost international level times, and you have to get a coach who is fully part of the system, part of the cover-up system, who would not create any problems, and who would just follow the orders and be happy with the fact that he or she can dope their athletes and do it well, do it successfully, and in return bring back medals to Russia from Olympic Games, from World Championships. And for that, you would not just be covered up with doping use, but you would also get bonuses. And yes.
Wow. But Yulia she was truly an international athlete. She ran 156.99 as a personal best. That's going to win you a medal at some Olympic Games. Here she is with this career and potential to medal, and she just tells you openly on the first date. So was she sort of at that point, because she was what, about 28 around then when you first dated? 28, 29?
No, she was 23.
23, so okay. So she's quite young.
And like I said, when we had our first date, even she doesn't know how well everything is covered up, because at that time she just ran 158.99.
Still fast.
Yes, so it was almost 2 years later that she ran that 156.99. And that was at the national championships where her samples were covered up.
Okay, so here she has, because the reason why she got into the sport was, according to David Walsh's book, The Russian Affair, is because she can get a better life at the end of it. And here she is at 23 telling you, before she knows she can trust you, on the first date, that she's doping. She's 23 years old, hasn't run a personal best yet, or career personal best. So was she looking for a way out anyway by that point, or why would she confess so early?
It was a date. So and I think for any kind of relationship to start, you look for a connection, and I guess you can say that honesty that is one of the things that we all value in a relationship. But I also often say that neither was really bright, and we were stupid, and we were honest with each other, and I was honest with her. She decided to be honest with me, and that's what she told me. That's somehow we got for the first few years, then got better. But part of it is also she was 100% sure that this how the system works within Russia, and that doping fighting doesn't really exist. And on top of that, every sports official and every coach within Russia will tell you that it's not just Russians doing it, it's everybody's doing it. And the reasons Russians get caught a little more sometimes because they don't run WADA. WADA is run by English-speaking persons, and that's why there are not as many positive samples in countries like England, USA, Canada, and Australia. So it's basically a matter of control and power. And if you have more power, you can cover up more things.
Wow. Well, if you just go back to the thing we like about other people is honesty. Well, there you go. On the very first date, she knew she liked you right away. How much of that would you believe? Because there is obviously doping globally. There are organizations like the Nike Oregon Project that have been alleged to play with the rules, and lots of people have been caught outside of Russia. So how much of that theory would you believe? Do you think there's other countries that do systematic doping?
I always used to answer to that. I simply don't know that, but I personally didn't look for that as an excuse to cover up doping within the country where I was born. So I obviously, if I'm being an optimistic, I'm hoping nowhere it is as bad as as it was in Russia, but I don't know that.
Sure. Well, if you look at Kenya right now, there's about 53 approximately athletes that are ineligible to compete. They don't have systematic doping as far as we know. It's rogue. It's just people on their own free will really wanting to get ahead. I don't think it's systematic there, but with 53 people ineligible to compete just in athletics alone, that's second to Russia. And Russia has a complete ban. So do you think Kenya needs to be banned so they can straighten out the situation there?
Again, I believe one of the positive things that World Athletics did after the Russian scandal, partially probably it was the decision was made, the Athletics Integrity Unit was created, which was, it seems and it looks that they are an independent body that can do their own investigations. There are no DX and no people surrounding DX that tell them what to do, as it was in the case with Gabriel Dali, right? The French guy who ran the anti-doping department under the DX. So they do investigations. They see what evidence they can get. And obviously, I feel if at some point they get more evidence from whistleblowers, from other sources, and if it's instead of improving, it's getting worse, then yes, a country that is not following the rules, it should not be a part of the athletics competition.
Yeah, so maybe that's the start of a new perspective on handling widespread doping, because there's other countries that have that sort of alleged perspective too, like Turkey and Morocco and a few others. But enough about them. Would you say that Russia as a whole is a corrupt society, and across the board in government it's corrupt, or is it just around sport?
Well, and it's partially in the book. What I and my wife saw that yes, it is a pretty corrupted country. And in fact, in Russia, we have a saying that we don't have corruption; we have a mutual understanding.
Right.
So that's how things are approached. You if somebody can benefit from covering something up, that's usually people take advantage of that because they see that in general things are just not as what the laws say.
Yeah, it's a mutual understanding. That's an interesting quote for sure. So, what about Icarus? Did you see? You must have seen the movie Icarus. It won that Oscar, and it documented Russian doping, but had Rodchenkov in the documentary. So, would you say that that was an accurate depiction of systematic doping in Russia?
Well, I watched it 3 years ago, I believe, maybe even a little longer, and it is not just about Russian doping. It actually started with a guy trying to cycle and cheat his way to the victory. So that's how the project started. So Russian doping was never even part of the initial thought of the documentary, and it just it is as the way it happened, and I guess I can say how correct it is 100%. I don't know. It is a business project. It was a business project. It is a business project that tries to attract attention of the audiences, and if they're completely honest, that's good. If they are not, they're just trying to make money.
How honest could they be? They're wanting to dope. The main star, and they're wanting to dope.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. This is a part of the I guess discussion, you can say, even about my wife, who was part of that system as well. To some extent, it was even told, especially in Russia, that I was covering up the doping use as well, which was not true, but it's been said anyways. But I do make a comparison. As far as I know, Dr. Rodchenkov says that he covered up Ben Johnson's positive sample in 1986 Goodwill Games, I believe. So that's the year when my wife was born. So if you compare how, she was just a small athlete within the system, and there is another person who has been covering up doping use basically all of her life.
Yeah.
for as long as she lived, and just the extent is really different. And I hope he's honest. I hope he's really trying to help to make things better, and I wish he tried to do it earlier.
And but at the end of the day, neither of you are in Russia. It just kind of speaks to what kind of danger you would be in if both of you stayed there. And because in the U.S. you could, or I'm in Canada, and in a lot of the world you can say what you've said, and not fear for your life, or not enough to go into exile. So that kind of speaks to that earlier question about is it pervasive through Russian society that it's generally corrupt, and just you not being there, and same with Rodchenkov, and having two different perspectives. His is more apparently about a little bit of fame and credibility, going for the ego, and yours is about doing the right thing.
Again, about the corruption within Russia when we were there, yes, it was part of the daily life. And every adult understands that in Russia. Again, when we were there.
We have a mutual understanding, societal mutual understanding. So What do you hope I mean, it almost sounds like a redundant question, but what do you hope the Russian affair by David Welch accomplishes?
First of all, I'm just thankful to David Walsh and the publisher that they were interested enough to tell our story. David Walsh was interested enough to spend so many hours with us and visit us so many times to write it, to redraft it, to help understand it, put in writing things that were not correct, not just us doing it as a family, but also within the anti-doping structures, not just the Russian anti-doping agency, but from the World Anti-Doping Agency as well. And if it is a factual book that includes the actual emails that were exchanged with the World Anti-Doping Agency as well in in 2010, 11, 12. I think if the organization was a little bit more in the rush to try to fight doping, a lot of these things could have been prevented if WADA took whistleblowers seriously and put them all at least together, which was never done. Then in the end of the day, I believe in the end of 2013, during the global anti-doping conference, the decision would have been made that that Moscow anti-doping lab would not be the lab during the Sochi Olympic Games, Sochi Winter Games. It would have been a backup lab somewhere in Switzerland. And the level of cover-up that happened could have been stopped, prevented. I guess I'd like to say that WADA didn't do enough to prevent doping within Russia during those years, and I hope they learn from their mistakes, and I hope they take partially responsibility, their own responsibility, that they failed thousands of clean athletes globally, that that put their many hours of hard work trying to do their best, but in the end they were competing against those that were not following the rules, and they lost their opportunity to, some of them to win medals, and I guess you can say that's life. But on the other hand, if an organization is created to fight doping, they should be fighting it, not just not just
enabling
it. Yes, exactly. And in the end, say 4 years later, that the code didn't allow us to investigate what was happening, and we could only change the code 4 years later. But during those 4 years, again, the athletes,
2016 came along, right?
Yeah. So it's all complicated. It's not perfect, but if we all can learn from such huge mistakes in the past, hopefully we can try to avoid it in the beginning. So for the book, that's just something we told. David Walsh wrote, and if anybody is interested to know about what was happening in more detail, we'd be thankful to any reader as well.
Okay, yeah. So speaking of that, it apparently I've read that it reads like a crime, like a crime novel, international espionage, so to speak. So if you're a great author and you make up, a great story and it sells, and it's all based on fiction, that's great. But here's a true story that outdoes the fiction. Do you sometimes sit back and just go, "Wow, I was part of the Russian anti-doping thing, and now I helped get them banned from global competition"? Do you sort of look at that as a big, overwhelming thing sometimes?
Well, every time I had to read the drafts, I was getting headaches, really, because for any reader, that's a story. For me, it was my life. that I had to live, and obviously when I was making the decisions, what even about whistleblowing and about getting evidence, we didn't know what would happen to us the next day. We could just try to be careful, try to think a little bit ahead about our safety. Obviously, we didn't even know that it would work, or if anybody would be interested in seeing what we have. Can you, just to finish my thought, can you repeat the question, please?
Well, I'm just thinking, generally speaking, of how overwhelming the thing is to have your country basically banned from international competition. To sometimes do you stop and just collect yourself and think, wow, what have I done? Like, this is a big deal. Like, do you have to come to terms with that once in a while?
Well, I guess on a personal level, yeah, sometimes I think, so this is what it meant to fight doping in Russia.
You did it.
Yes, I think that. So it wasn't as simple as coming to a Russian anti-doping agency and doing your small educational part or collecting urine samples or blood samples. You had to do some more to actually to try to fight it.
Wow, that's an understatement. Change your life. You're in exile, so to speak. You're the topic of what is probably going to be a big seller, The Russian Affair by David Walsh. It comes out at the same time as the Rodchenkov affair, which is interesting. So it's going to create a whole debate because some of what he said conflicts with some of your story too, doesn't it?
Again, I did not read his story. We as a family started doing whistleblowing a lot more. We told it as things were happening, even in 2009, 2010. There are emails that were sent to WADA to back up the things that we are saying in the book. Yeah, but it is, I guess you can say that it is our opinion how things were happening that was written by David Walsh, and also including his own opinion, trying to fight Lance Armstrong for many years, and in general, a journalist who stands up for clean sports and how he understands doping fighting and how things might be improved, what should be better. He knows many top people from the World Anti-Doping Agency, so you put it all together, you put it in 300 pages of writing, and yes, I assume there would be differences in what's said in Rodchenkov's book, because I guess you can say that he committed a lot more sports crimes, and he had to be a lot more careful with how he writes things. And I can only guess that he had many more people, including lawyers, rereading his writing and saying that's okay to put that in writing.
Well, it goes back to before Yulia was born, as you mentioned before. So he's got a long trail behind him that he has to keep track of. So I should let you go.
Sorry, and then still seem credible. Yeah, yes, exactly. So it's just he has a lot harder
vetting of the story to do.
He had a lot harder work in his hand to do. Yes.
Yeah, so I should let you go in a second, but I do have a question regarding, I know you can't say where you are, and I don't want to know either, but what is life like? Like, you got Robert, who's what, 5 or 6 years old now?
6, yes.
And do you lead a fairly normal life? You can get out and about and not be identified?
Yes, in general, yes, that's we don't have any kind of status here. We're still waiting. We cannot travel outside the country, but in general, in the US, we like it. Basically, nobody really, people in general, on the first time you meet somebody, nobody really goes into detail who you are and what you do or what you did. And that's the approach we have with meeting people as well. You talk about weather, right? you talk about weather, and you talk about that's commonly discussed. And and then you connect with some of these people. You do sports with some of these people. You go hiking. In general, we like where we are, and I hope we can stay here. But But as of now, we don't know that.
But anyway, I appreciate your time. Good luck with the book. I hope it goes well. I'm sure it will. It's timely, and it's a hot topic. So I appreciate your time today, and good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris Kelsall with athletics.illustrated.com. Please join us on social media. We have a Strava Club at /Athletics Illustrated. We are on Facebook and Instagram, as well as Twitter at athillustrated.com. And of course, get all your latest athletics news at www.athleticsillustrated.com.